Hey there, it's Olivia Savannah here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and today I'm here to give you a recent read where I talk about 10 of the books that I've recently read and all of my thoughts on them. I've got content warnings in the description box down below in case it's something you need. Without further ado, let's get down to 10 of the books that I recently read because they are very, very exciting ones. So we're starting off bright and brilliant because I finally read Don't Let the Forest In by C.G. Drews. This is a young adult horror novel and you are following these two boys. One of them is autistic and he is ace, but he doesn't know how to talk about that, and he's going back to this school where we know something strange has happened in the previous year. He's got a twin sister and he's got a very good friend who he is secretly in love with, but he thinks his friend might secretly be in love with his sister. They're all friends together, so there's a lot of the jealousy and tension in their friendships. The sister and his friend are arguing as well, and so while all of that is going down and you've got all of these character tensions, there's also something very strange happening about the fairy tales that he writes and the illustrations that his friend draws and secrets that his friend is keeping around all of those things. And I really love this book. I gave it 5 stars and it became a new favorite. This book just crawled into my heart and it was there to stay. Andrew and Thomas are our two boys, our main characters, and I really like them. I like them together as friends and I ship them together as a couple as well. And when you can see how their friendship is just so good together, even though it is a little bit of, you know, it's got a touch of that homoerotic reliance and codependability that they seem to have as well. It just makes you root for them all the more, whether that's in friendship or romantically. I just wanted them to be okay, and I really like that. For the majority of reading this, I hadn't read the synopsis because I do think the synopsis tells you what's happening a bit too soon, when it's actually fun to read this book and find out what's happening along the way. And so it becomes one of those tales that's a little bit dark, a little bit mysterious, so Raven Cycle coded. If you like the Raven Cycle, you will probably like this book because the writing is just so luscious and lovely, and it's got that dark, gothic, slightly magical undertone to it all. Our main character writes fairy tales, and you do get to see the fairy tales themselves that he writes in this book, and there are illustrations to go along with it because Thomas is the one who draws the art that goes along with those fairy tales. So it's also a visually beautiful book. I liked how it was a dark fairy tale. I like that you know it's building to something sinister and therefore it's going to have a sinister ending. I do think this is the best ace representation that I've read in a book in a long time. Its own voices for the ace rep, its own voices for the autism rep, because C.G. Drews is autistic and also ace themselves, and I just really love how that was woven into the story. It's not a story about a character who is ace, it's a story about a character who is struggling to understand what is happening with their friendships, with their siblinghood, but the ace representation and also the autistic representation is woven into it immaculately. So that was really well done. I saw the ending coming. I think that comes from the fact that I am an adult reading this book, and I've also read a book that's done something similar before. I bet you have as well, but I won't tell you what book that is. And I just really enjoyed it. There's nothing I can fault this book for. The only thing is that the pacing is a little bit off and sometimes it gets a little bit repetitive before we get the reveal of what's going on, but I still liked being there on that journey with these boys because you get so many intimate little moments that really shape their characters. This is one for the character-driven readers. This is one for those who are longing for someone, who have a long-time crush, who like the friends to lovers slow burn and just want them to, you know, finally say their true feelings, but know that these boys are just so timid and shy and don't want to ruin their friendship. It was just so lovely. Really recommend this one. Then I finally read The Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch, and I can see why everybody always recommends this because I did enjoy reading it. So this is a high fantasy book that's low on the magic. The magic is less a thing in this than I thought, and more so a found family. You're following Locke Lamora, and he is a young child who is taken into this gang society, and they are thieves. There's 2 storylines. There's one in the past where you see him become part of the gentleman gang and how they form a found family and how they get their skills and the training that they've had, and then you've got a present day storyline where they are trying to pull off a very extensive con to steal a lot of money. What I liked about this book is that that is the plot but it is so layered. There's a con, and there's a larger con within the con, and there are also other elements to the plot too. So if you are a plot-driven reader, you are going to enjoy this book because Scott Lynch has thought about every single scene that he includes in this book. And I especially liked seeing the flashbacks. I really enjoyed the past storyline because I think he did an immaculate job of having the past flashbacks that we see echo and give us information that leads into and feeds into the present day storyline that we get in this as well. Found family is one of my favourite tropes, and while this is a found family at its core, for some reason it just didn't pull me in the way that most found families do. I was just not quite as connected to this one and as invested in the characters as I am with other books, and that might be just because the plot was so good and had so much political intrigue and so much layering that I just didn't have that much time to get as invested in the characters. I do think Locke is not my favourite. I did slowly become endeared towards him towards the end, but it took a long time for me to love these characters, and I did have a favourite character. Yeah, it took me a while to like his character and like care about him as much as I should have. And what I also love about this book is that Scott Lynch is not afraid to kill his darlings. Do you know what? He can kill a character, and I love when authors in high epic fantasies where the stakes are as high as they are do kill off characters, because realistically that's just gonna happen. That is just going to happen, but it also just ups those stakes. It means that nobody is safe. It means that anything can happen at any time, and whenever anybody's in danger, it just escalates that scene so much more. So I really respect Scott Lynch for killing his darlings in this one, and by the end of the book, when it all came together, I just sat there thinking like, yeah, that's how you tell a story. That's good storytelling. My only gripe with this, again, is that the pacing is a little bit slow. There are some scenes where I was just wondering, where is this going? Why are we here? What is this going to amount to? And yes, in the end, everything does amount to something, but it sure does take the long way round from time to time. So be ready for an epic journey. The next book that I read was Heart the Lover by Lily King. This was my first Lily King book. It's a literary fiction, and you're following this young woman as she goes through university and the romantic entanglements that she has along the way, and that's pretty much the beginning and end of the story. That's what it's about, but it is such a beautiful book. This absolutely captivated me, and a lot of that has to do with the writing. The writing is exquisite. It is intricate. The way the author manages to build the scenes so vividly in my mind and create such realistic, well-rounded characters who have their flaws, I absolutely loved that. And this book is a book for the yearners. I have not read a literary fiction book that is for the yearners in such a long time. There is a distinct feeling of, have I made the right choices? Have I made the wrong ones? Bittersweet emotions, and you know, the conundrum of friendship and romance and life choices, pains, forgiveness, so much. And it is also a story that has sadness to it. There is grief in this book, so be prepared for that. I really liked how it was done and how it was handled and how emotional it was. There was just so much emotional tension put into and injected into the smaller scenes in this book, and that is a skill and difficult to do, and I respect Lily King for managing to do that. The way that I'm talking about this book is that I'm comparing it to Past Lives. I loved the film Past Lives, and this book in particular really has that sense of, if I'd made this choice, maybe my life would have been like this, and if I'd made that choice, maybe my life would have been like that, maybe we would have interacted differently. And so I really liked getting to see that in this book. For a significant part of this book as well, our main character is studying at university, and she is studying English literature and creative writing, and it's not a dark academia book by any means, but oh my goodness, the way that it made me long for my degree once again. I think it perfectly captivated that love of reading, how a certain book can impact your life, and a certain line or words written in a particular way, imbued with particular meaning, can have such an effect on you. And there is discussion on the art of creating writing and work, and then having to market it and what that does to someone. So even though that's not a main part of the plot, it was like a side storyline that I really appreciated and really loved getting to see in this book. I liked where it ended. There was only one answer I wanted a bit more on from the end of that book, but all in all, absolutely phenomenal. I will absolutely read more Lily King in future. Then I wanted some romance in my life, so I read Loathe to Love You by Ali Hazelwood. This is a collection of 3 short stories, and each short story focuses on a trope. We've got got one short story that's called Stuck With You, and it's based on these two characters who get stuck in a lift. There's another one which is called Below Zero, and this is where one of them gets trapped in a scientific excursion within the Arctic and somebody else comes to rescue her. And then the last one is like the And They Were Roommates one, where there are two people who are reluctantly roommates and have to share a house, and each one ends in a romance. We're following three women and they are all friends, so you follow their individual romances, but of course they connect because they show up in each other's stories. And I had a good time with this, but I do think it's formulaic because they are all following the same formula. You get a present day moment and then you'll flash back into the past, and it switches between present day, past, present day, past. Ali Hazelwood loves her Scandinavian men, so we've got a lot of Scandinavian, you know, love interests. We often have the small, short, tiny woman and the large, tall, handsome man. We've always got a very like physically and sexually experienced woman and then like an inexperienced man. That's typically the way the stories go. So while they're not all cookie cutter this, they kind of all follow these tempos and beats, which means you do fall into a rhythm of familiarity. But the one thing that Ali Hazelwood does so well is write. She writes in such a compelling way, and the conversations just flow so naturally back and forth that whether or not you ship the romances, you just enjoy getting to read about the characters and you enjoy getting them to the point of their happily ever after. And so I was just merrily reading this book and I was minding my business and having a good time. So even though I do have some like complaints about it being too samey and repetitive and all of these three stories felt similar, I still had a good time. I enjoyed falling into the fanfic tropes that I recognize and love and find so familiar as a fanfic reader. I enjoyed the banter that Ali Hazelwood always brings to the table in every single one of her books, and I was just satisfied by the end. I did a buddy read with one of my work colleagues and we read Play Nice by Rachel Harrison. This is my first Rachel Harrison novel, even though I have read her short stories before, and this one is her taking on the concept of a haunted house. There are three siblings. They used to live in this house with their good-for-nothing mum, and strange things happened. They got taken out of her care and the sisters tried their best to forget everything that went down in the house. However, the youngest sibling, the one that we are following, she does not quite remember anything that happened. When the mother dies, the house is left to the sisters and she decides she's going to go there, she's going to live there, she's going to do it up, and then she's going to sell it. But maybe there were more claims to the house being haunted than everybody believes. I had a really good time reading this book. It was a lot of fun. It's a 400-page haunted house novel, so I will say that I feel like this is the refrain. Pacing was slightly off. I think it slowed down in some really weird places where it could have escalated and sped up, and then sometimes it would understand that I was finding things a bit laggy and then speed up in a way that I was like, oh, this is so exciting, let's keep the pace, and then it would stop and drop that pace. So it did feel a bit weird pace-wise, but what I loved about this the most were the three sisters. You've got an elder sister, a middle child, and a younger sister, and as someone who comes from a lineup of sisters as well, I just always love when we get to see those sharp and distinct dynamics. And let me tell you, these sisters fulfill those dynamics. They each have their own individual personalities, but the more that I got to understand these sisters, the roles that they play and the things that they tell each other, I absolutely loved it. And it is a very complex relationship. There is a shared sense of trauma, but each and every single one of those sisters believe that they shared the trauma collectively because they are sisters who are close. But they have to understand that because they're all different ages and they all have different memories of things, they actually did experience the trauma slightly differently. And this is a very layered novel. There's a lot of who is telling the truth. Is this an unreliable narrator? Because everybody's unreliable. Everybody remembers trauma in a slightly different way. So all three of the sisters have a perspective. The dad has a perspective. Although the mum has passed away, she's left her annotations of a book around what happened in the past behind. So you get to see her unreliable narrative because people paint her in a certain light for being an alcoholic and for being an abusive parent. And then you've got the youngest sister who remembers bits and fragments but not the clear whole thing. So is her narration actually something that we can trust? I enjoyed and gobbled up the whole unreliable narrator and layers to the story elements. I think Rachel Harrison writes characters so well. Other than the sisters, I was really invested in all of the secondary characters as well. And there's quite a lot in here on, you know, gaslighting, manipulation, storytelling, the truth, the lies. And I really like how she handled that theme and really tackled it and unpacked it and let it weave into the story. But she did not forget that this is a haunted house story. There may be something, a ghost, a demon, some supernatural entity haunting this house. And so there is ample time given to that. I haven't spoken about it in this review yet, but I did like the haunting elements. I think at times this managed to be very creepy, very eerie. It made me not want to stay in this house at all. And so the atmosphere was truly, and you know, very well captured. There was a couple that I shipped in this. I liked seeing someone who was very jaded and who didn't believe love was possible reluctantly start to fall for someone. I found that very satisfying to see, and our main character does grow a lot in this. She has character growth, and I appreciated getting to see that. So all in all, I mostly had a good time with this, and I think it was fairly fantastic. So now we are halfway through the video, and I can tell you that if you head over to my Patreon and sign up to any of my tiers, you'll be able to find an exclusive wrap-up of Enchanting the Fae Queen by Stephanie Burgis. And to all of my Patreons, thank you so much for subscribing. I truly appreciate it. But onto the other books. I then read another book that I absolutely loved, and that was Exhalation by Ted Chiang. This is a short story collection of sci-fi stories. They're all quite different, but I absolutely love this. I gave this 5 stars and it became a new favourite. In fact, I would rate most of the individual stories in this collection 5 stars each. Ted Chiang, to live in his mind, would be something else. The concepts and the ideas that he explores here are absolutely fascinating to me. They are so unique. They are full of what I like to call my favorite kind of sci-fi, where it's sci-fi where the science is injected into the stories. It's very clearly explained to us, and yet I don't feel overwhelmed by scientific jargon. It's explained in a way that is very down to earth. Now, some of the concepts that these short stories explore are things around the future of the Earth with climate change, some things to do with time travel, a lot to do with the choices we make in life and, you know, splitting off into different universes based on the choices we make, whether we have any autonomy over the choices we make or if it's just fate that decides them. So a lot of these stories are dealing with things that are applicable to the present day, but it's showing it in quite a futuristic light. And so I appreciated and enjoyed getting to see that social commentary reflected on our current society by talking about something that has been extrapolated into the future. I thought that was expertly well done. But even though Ted Chiang is dealing with such like large concepts with each and every story and such large scientific inventions and creations, he still brings it home. He still has a main character threaded through each story. There's a main character or a main creature or a main alien that we are following, and because we are following one person through the story and getting all of the science explained through their perspective, the concepts slowly revealed to us through what they are doing in their life, that it brings it home. It makes it personal, it makes it easier to understand, and it makes us have a character to root for. I saw someone online describe this as Black Mirror, and I do think that's accurate. I do think each short story feels like a Black Mirror episode, but sometimes Black Mirror episodes can have quite a dark and desolate conclusion, whereas I would say that each of these short stories actually had quite a wholesome and heartfelt or hopeful message behind it. Even though sometimes it was dealing with dark themes, it still managed to end in a way that made me think, oh, there is hope for the future, or oh, you know, we can be better than this. And so I liked that. I liked that these stories, even though they were so futuristic, still somehow managed to have a positive tinge in some way or form. I know that Ted Chiang has more short story collections, and I am there. Sign me up. Then we've got a couple of authors that I've been returning to a lot lately, and guess what? I returned to them again. So I read The Coworker by Freida McFadden. I've been blitzing through Freida McFadden's thrillers, and this one is about this woman who works in an office, and she has a colleague called Delilah, and Delilah gets to work at the same time every day, does the same things, follows the same pattern. It's never stated that Delilah is autistic. However, it is heavily implied throughout this whole thing that Delilah is autistic. And Delilah doesn't show up for work one day. And this woman, our main character, thinks that's very strange because Delilah always shows up at the same time, and she investigates what has happened. I read this, I enjoyed it well enough, but I don't need to keep it in my life forever. It's not going to be the most memorable thing. This is following the two women, and I saw what was coming. I think it was quite clear, but maybe it's not quite clear to everybody. It has that sinister, like, what is going on here? Let me try and figure it out. Something is very creepy happening. I thought that Freida McFadden knows how to build suspense, and she does it here again. It's so hooky and compulsive. I blitzed through this in like 2 to 3 days. I could just like whiz straight through this book, because the way that Freida McFadden writes, you just want to keep eating it up. You want to keep turning the pages, you want to keep reading and just see where it gets you. It's not my favourite depiction of characters. Everybody is quite unlikable in this. We've got a woman that just has such stereotypical woman who's single dating thoughts, and that naggled at me. I just find it really frustrating when I just see women portrayed as these like really superficial, men-pleasing kind of people. And then Delilah is so autistic coded, but in a very stereotypical way that it doesn't feel like good representation, but it's never stated, and it just makes me feel a bit icky when I read this kind of representation, so I didn't love that. Delilah is also completely enamored by sea turtles and regurgitates sea turtle facts all the time. Now, it's a good thing that I love turtles. Turtles are one of my favourite animals, so I absolutely love them, and I'm happy to read a lot about them, but I don't think that's going to be the case for everyone. It's not a children's book where you're happy to find facts buried everywhere. I think some people are going to get quite frustrated by that. I did think the ending was entertaining. I liked where the book went and how it wrapped up. Is it entirely realistic? Probably not. No, but I still had a very good time. Even though I saw some things coming, there were others that I didn't foresee coming, which was fun as always. And yeah, that's just how I felt about this one. It was a nice, quick, easy book to whiz through, but it's not going to be like a best book of the year for me. Authors that I've been returning to, I've been slowly and gradually making my way through the Dark Olympus series by Katee Robert, and I read Radiant Sin, which I think is the 4th book in the series. These are Greek mythology retellings with dark romance elements, and in this one we're following Apollo and Cassandra's story. It involves fake dating when Apollo needs to go underground for a certain case, and so he fake dates Cassandra, who is one of his employees, but of course maybe they're going to fall in love along the way, and there's a whole overarching plot going on in the Dark Olympus world, which I can tell you nothing about because I don't want to spoil anything, but this ties into that quite nicely. Now, of this book in the series, what I can tell you is that in terms of steaminess, it is very steamy and it is still very good, as Katee Robert always injects her dark romance steaminess with a heavy dose of consent and making that consent really sexy, and she does that once again here. These two seem to have a little bit of a like command kink, so it's not really BDSM, but it's like the command element, that dynamic that you find in BDSM, and they also really like a little bit of voyeurism, or like maybe doing things in public and possibly they might be spotted. So that's what you get in terms of steaminess. It's very steamy, it's written really well, and this is actually a softer turn around Dark Olympus. Often Katee Roberts managed to balance the plot elements with the romance elements, but in this one it's like 75 romance element and then 25% plot. You are going to get more of their romantic entanglements than you typically would in one of these books, which I think worked well. I liked this couple. I like their dynamic. You've seen a lot of fake dating trope within this series, so I am a little bit tired of it, but that did not stop me from liking seeing them together. It's a little bit of a friends to lovers because they've been working together for so long. However, we don't get to see that friendship. It's been pre-established in the 2 to 3 years that they've been working together before. So we ourselves don't actually get to see that friendship building. We just have to take for granted that it's there. All of this said, I did really enjoy this. I liked being back in this familiar world. I liked seeing this couple together. I also liked what went down with Hermes and the ex. So Cassandra's ex is Hermes, and seeing them two together and their dynamic, I'm just so intrigued by Hermes' character, and I can't wait to get to her book in particular. And then towards the end, the plot ramps up. The overall overarching plot, it just goes like boom, 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 and it keeps adding more suspense and more consequences to the political intrigue in this world, and I absolutely ate that up with a spoon. I loved it. I love the direction that this whole story is taking and what it's building towards, and I do look forward to the next book. I can tell that it's going to be another arranged, you know, marriage kind of book, which is fake dating in disguise, so I'm not really looking forward to that element, but we are going to be following a quite fascinating character, so I am looking forward to that. So yeah, read another one in this series, had a good time. Then I read Loveboat Reunion by Abigail Hing. This is the sequel to Loveboat Taipei. Back when I read Loveboat Taipei, it was one of my favourite books of the year that I read it. I give it 5 stars and I absolutely loved it. And this just was not quite up there for me. I think I was mostly disappointed in this because of how much I liked the first book in the series, and the first one wrapped everything up as a standalone, and I think it should have stayed that way, and it should have just been a standalone, and the author did not need to write this book. That said, it's not a bad book, it's just completely dragging all over the place. So in this one we're following Sophie and Xavier. Sophie and Xavier had a little thing in Loveboat Taipei and it didn't work out, and I don't want to spoil the first book, but there's a lot of like romantic drama between these two that happened and went down, but they are not together. They've decided to be friends. But Sophie ends up putting on a reunion for the Loveboat folks. This is going to take place in Asia around the Mid-Autumn Festival, but it's also going to double up as her trying to find a project for this AI course that she's on, and also Xavier, who needs to make a film so that he can finally pass high school, because he's never been able to. He's severely dyslexic and nobody seems to be able to help him with aids to overcome his dyslexia. They just seem to be throwing "you need to pass or else" at him. So that's the story and what this revolves around. It takes 150 pages for the reunion talk to even kick off, like the idea of the reunion happening. It takes 150 pages before that happens. That is absolutely ridiculous. It needed to happen sooner. It's in the synopsis on the back. You cannot be taking 150 pages to get to your point. No. For a lot of those 150 pages, our two main characters are in different countries. They're not together, they're talking on the phone, and I get that it's all set up for what the story is going to be, but it's too long and it drags for too much. There's also quite a lot of side stories in here. This is a young adult contemporary that's 400 pages. That is wrong. I think young adult contemporary needs to be 300 pages or less, typically, unless you've got something significant to say. This did not have something significant to say. That's not to say that everything in here is useless. There are some very good themes in this. I did like the themes of women in business not being respected as much, and how women actually have something interesting to bring to the table, specifically within the fashion industry. They know what they're talking about. It's not an industry that should be disregarded as unprofitable or silly. I liked that message. Does it deserve a spot in a young adult novel? Probably, but the way that it did it was very interesting because it was very much an adult theme, and the adults of the story were solving this problem and doing it, but Sophie just managed to be around at the right time for it to be woven into a young adult book. I felt like the author wanted to write an adult book about this, but kind of shoved it into this young adult book. I liked all of the celebration around the Mid-Autumn Festival. I did like that Xavier has such a complicated relationship with his father, and everything around that, and how he learns things from his father's point of view and what his father is putting up with and why he does what he does, I liked. I also really thought this was brilliant representation in terms of dyslexia and how much it can affect somebody's life, especially if it goes undiagnosed for a long time, or if people just don't have the sensitivities and the right attitudes or wanting to help this person. I think that was shown very well in this, and it also talks about a different condition as well called dyspraxia, and it introduces it to the reader, and I just really love how all of that representation was done. But I have to admit, this is dual point of view. It's Sophie's point of view, it's Xavier's point of view. I did not really care about Sophie's point of view. I didn't really connect to her as a character, and I just wasn't loving the storyline that she had. I was all about Xavier's storyline in terms of the representation and the family dynamic, and I think if this was all from Xavier's point of view and we cut out Sophie's storyline, or at least diminished it to be a secondary one, it would have actually worked a lot better, because it would have made a shorter story, it would have narrowed down the plot threads that we are balancing, and it just would have gotten to the point a lot quicker. And so I really felt so mixed about this book, because there were moments where I was really enjoying it, and there were moments where I was like, I need to DNF this, and I obviously didn't, and I'm happy that I finished this book. But there is a third book in the series, and I can confirm I will not be reading that one right now, and I'm basically going to be pretending that this series is a standalone with the first book. And then last but not least, I read Release by Patrick Ness. This is a book that takes place all across one day. We're following Adam, who is a gay teenager who's living in a family that are very religious, and they believe that being queer is wrong, and you follow him going about his day, seeing his boyfriend, knowing that his ex is leaving the city, and all of the emotional turmoil and struggles that he goes through in this particular day. You are also separately getting another storyline about a girl who has been murdered and who comes back from the dead, and this is a bit more of a magical experimental storyline. In terms of this being a book about Adam and what is happening to him, I really did like this. Patrick Ness writes young adult contemporary, and he always injects his writing with so much emotion. It was really beautiful and lyrical to read, but it was also such a sad and painful, and a book charged full of hurt and pain because of the way that Adam is treated by his family. He is a teenager who's coming of age, who's growing up, who's discovering like sex and bodies and queerness and what that means for him and what love is, and whether he, you know, loves this person or can move on from this person. He's experiencing his first heartbreak while he's currently got a boyfriend as well. And all of those confusing feelings are being diminished by his family, who are saying the way that you love is wrong and we cannot accept that. And it really hurt reading this to see how people were wielding like scripture and verse and twisting it on its head to make Adam feel smaller. And so throughout this book you're just like, oh my gosh, this teenager is going through so much and having to process and mature and learn so much just because the parents are so unaccepting. And so I found this to be like a really important story, but also a very painful one to read. It's got a very nice depiction of friendship in here, and I loved seeing those two characters be friends with each other, and you kind of get some stories about past ways that they've supported each other, and it just shows how important chosen family can really be, especially for the queer community. And I love that that shone through this book as an underlying thread. It does tackle some tough topics, so make sure you check the content warnings down below. But overall, this is a very quick read. It's not that many words, it's very direct and straight to the point, but you see this beautiful arc in the day as Adam comes to learn and realise some things about himself, about his family, and about what he wants to do in the future. Lovely, lovely, lovely. In terms of the magical storyline though, about this girl who was murdered and comes back to life, nothing. I understood absolutely nothing of that storyline. I cannot tell you what happened. I cannot tell you what the message was, what the meaning was, what the conclusion was. It was all so whimsical and disconnected from the main story that I just did not understand. And Patrick Ness often does this, where he writes a contemporary story that has a slight magical or speculative edge to it. And the speculative edge or storyline often is metaphorical for what is happening in the main storyline. This is probably the case again here. If you figure out how it fits in, please come and explain it to me. I'm ready to be taught what it meant, because I just did not understand it. So I can't say that I love this book completely, because there was a whole storyline and many pages that I read that I just completely didn't understand. But for the storyline that is the present day and what it gives me, I did really like this book, and I thought it was very, very good. And there you have it. Those are 10 books that I've recently read and all of my thoughts on them. Please let me know in the comment section down below, was there ever a book that you just didn't understand, that you just didn't get or didn't feel intelligent enough to process? Please let me know so I know that I'm not alone in this feeling. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't forget to hit that notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video. And you know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior!